Hello, and welcome to Horrific Tales. Before we begin, can I just ask that you like and share these videos, and if you have a moment, subscribe to the channel. Let's try and get as much exposure as possible for horrorists. This week's tale is what happens when supernatural elements meet magical forces in an exorcism gone wrong. Please sit back and enjoy Glendale, brought to you by Dawn Shea.
I was born and raised in Glendale, Arizona. My father died when I was 10, leaving my mother to care for 5 children, of which I was the youngest. She remarried about 7 years later, after all my siblings had left the house. My stepfather's name was Richard, and he was a retired military man. Not an overly controlling fellow, he was easygoing with a definite air of order about him. We lived in a fairly normal suburban life, with one exception. Richard was a warlock. Said that he had been part of the Rosicrucians since he was a very young man. Being dedicated and eager, he quickly moved up in the ranks and was bestowed the honour of warlock. My confusion must have draped across my face, because he calmly explained. They were a group of people adherents to 17th century esoteric and occult wisdom passed on from their ancestors. Their beliefs combined science and religious mysticism. Richard always seemed like a normal guy to me, a little more intuitive than most perhaps. I knew he often went to the spare room that he kept locked and did things, but I never thought much about it. I assumed he was reading one of the many tomes or some such. I had more important things going on in my mind, like boys and my senior year of high school. Besides, it was my mother's job to keep up with him, not mine. I never noticed anything overly odd about him. He was never missing for long periods of time, or making any weird concoctions in the kitchen. Nothing that would have made me automatically say, "Oh, he's a warlock." Richard and my mother had been married for about a year when the fateful night occurred. My mother had come into my room after I returned from school. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and she told me they were going out to dinner and would be home late. Richard had some business to attend. I remember lying across my bed, listening to my record player, as she popped in to tell me they were leaving with a kiss on the forehead. I listened for the car to pull out of the driveway, before hopping on the phone with my best buddy Liz. Richard later described it as a Tudor-style home on the outskirts of town. His leader had summoned him to this location for an exorcism. My mother accompanied him. She was a curious woman, much like myself, and up to observe things of the supernatural. They were led into a room where a young girl about 10 years old was sitting on a small couch, with her head slumped over the back. They could not see her face. It was pointed up to the ceiling, but she had long blonde hair that hung almost to the floor. There was a butterfly clip in her hair, lined with blue stones. My mother would later say that she remembered noticing the clip because of the way it glistened in the dull light. A man came in from the back of the house and introduced himself as her father. He thanked him for coming and then began to explain the situation. He voiced to them that the phenomenon had begun taking place about 6 weeks prior and they had exhausted all of their resources. The exorcism was the last resort. The stepfather began to steady himself for the ritual when my mother burst out into uncontrollable laughter. My mother, much like myself, finds it hard to control her laughter during serious situations. The slightest oddity would birth a giggle that cascaded into a full and convulsion fit. After several minutes of hysterical laughter, Richard sent her out to wait in the car. She says she sat in the car for about an hour, listening to the radio, before finally he came out, walking with a limp, his mind off in another world. He wouldn't tell her exactly what happened inside the house that night, but everything had gone as it should, and they proceeded to go to dinner. When they returned home that night, my mother went into the kitchen and made some tea, and Richard went straight to bed. "Is he sick?" I asked my mother. "No, dear, he's not sick. He had some amorc business before we went to dinner, and it just took a lot out of him. He's tired. He'll be right as rain in the morning. You'll see." I shrugged my shoulders. "If you say so. I'm going to finish my book. Night." "Good night, honey. Sleep well. Love you." I hid the stairs and went back to my room and my romance novel. It wasn't long after that I dozed off to sleep and started to dream of a roll in the hay with a young farmhand named Chaz. I had been asleep for a couple of hours when I awoke to a scraping sound. I could tell it was coming from downstairs. It was a start and stop noise, not continuous. I walked sleepily to the door of my bedroom and listened. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. I ventured down the stairs as quietly as possible. When I reached the bottom, I noticed that all of the dining room chairs were sitting in the entryway, all except one, and it was sitting on the farther side of the room, sliding back and forth across the floor. There was no one in the room that could have been causing the motion, yet light scratch marks were streaked across the hardwood floor. I stood staring for a few moments when I heard the hallway closet door open. I turned to look behind me, and the door was slowly opening of its own fruition. I stood stock still, waiting for the contents of the closet to be revealed. Common sense took over, however, and I ran as fast as I could back to my room. I jumped into bed and pulled the covers over my head. I listened intently for any footsteps or other noise out of the ordinary, hearing none. After a while, I dozed off to sleep again, and the next thing I knew, light was shining through the blanket. I uncovered my head to rays of sunshine peeking through the curtains, and a bird chirping outside the window. Dressing quickly, I ran downstairs. Nothing was out of the ordinary, and everything was in its proper place. My mum and stepdad were in the kitchen, eating breakfast at the bar as I sauntered into the room. They showed no sign anything was wrong. "Everything okay this morning?" I asked in a nonchalant way. My mother looked at me with a concerned smile. "Fine. Are you okay?" I looked around the room again. Yeah, sure. I've got to get to school. I'll see you guys later." My mum threw her hand in a wave, and Richard, never looking up from his newspaper, mumbled, "Have a good day." I got into my car, and for the whole 10-minute drive, I thought about what I had seen the night before, or maybe what I thought I had seen. I decided it must have been a dream, but it sure seemed real. I pulled up to school with minutes to spare, and as I went on with my day, I quickly forgot about the events from the night before. When I returned home that afternoon, the house was empty and all was quiet. I went upstairs to complete my homework. I had been working for about 30 minutes when I heard it again, the scraping of the chair. I grabbed my Polaroid camera this time, intent on capturing this phenomenon on film, and ran downstairs. As I neared the dining room, I realised the noise had stopped. All of the chairs were in place, the house encompassed by silence. I continued to look around. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary, except the hall closet door. It was standing wide open. I turned back to take one final look at the dining room, and a girl of about 10 or 11 was standing in front of me. She had long blonde hair, and she had a scream frozen on her face. She was transparent, and I could see the dining room table through her. She was pointing towards the closet door. I looked at the closet and did not see anything except coats, boots, and old sports equipment. Turned back, she had vanished. Shaking, I walked to the closet and moved the coats back. Nothing was noticeably out of place. I was terrified and not sure what to do, so I lay in my bed and waited for my mum to get home. It was sunset when I heard the front door open. Heading downstairs, I could see her standing at the hallway closet, jacket in hand, just staring into the darkness. "Mum," I said, descending the stairs. She did not move. "Mum?" Still no response as I drew near. I reached out and touched her shoulder, and she startled almost as if she was dazed. Oh, hi, honey. Did you have a good day at school?" She smiled. "Are you okay? You were like in a trance or something." I looked at her worriedly. "Yes, dear, I'm fine. I was just thinking about what to cook for supper. Deep in thought is all." She turned and headed back towards the kitchen. I followed behind her to make sure she was all right. "Do you mind handing me the roast from the fridge? I'm going to go ahead and put it in the oven. It'll be about ready when Richard gets home." I pointed towards the fridge. I walked over and opened the door to see the large slab of meat sitting in the middle shelf. I grabbed it, turned to close the door, and saw my mother standing at the stove. The girl was behind her. I didn't know what to do, and dropped the roast into the floor with a wet-sounding splat. My mother moved over next to me. I couldn't hear what she was saying. All I could focus on was the girl standing in the kitchen with her mouth open, pointing towards the hall closet. "Kim, are you alright?" "What's wrong?" she asked gingerly. I finally regained my bearings. "Huh? Yes, I'm alright. I thought I saw a mouse." She laughed. "Oh my, I certainly hope not. Good thing this roast was still wrapped up," she said as she bent to pick it up. "Sorry about that, Mum. I think I'm going to go take a bath. I don't think I'm feeling very well," I said as I backed towards the doorway. Do you need me to get you anything? Is there something I can do? She asked. No, I just need a little rest, I think. I didn't sleep well last night. I'm going to take a nice relaxing bath, and maybe a short nap before dinner. That should do the trick. I turned and started out of the kitchen. Okay, but if you need anything, just give me a yell, she called after me. I got to the bathroom in record time, and realised I was shaking again. I turned the water on to get warm, and started to remove my clothes. I sank slowly into the welcoming water. It felt like heaven. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, for about a minute, or maybe longer. I was startled awake by the feeling of someone watching me. Opening my eyes, the water was suddenly icy cold, and sitting on the end of the tub was the little girl. She looked just as she had when I last saw her, and she was pointing downstairs. Splashing water everywhere, I exited the tub, wrapped myself in a robe and headed back downstairs. I went straight to the hallway closet and began pulling all of the contents out. I dumped shoes upside down, pulled pockets inside out, threw sports equipment to the side, and just when I was about to give up, I grabbed my stepfather's trench coat and ran my hands through the pockets. I pulled out a hair clip that was shaped like a butterfly. It did not look familiar to me, but something felt right surrounding it. I would tell Richard everything later. I was waiting on the stairs when the front door opened, and I ran straight down, almost bowling him over. Kim, is everything alright? He asked. Well, yes and no. I found this in your coat. I was hoping you could tell me where it came from. I extended my hand out to show him the clip. He looked at it carefully. I believe I do know who it belongs to. I was doing a job the other night, and in the chaos it fell off, and I stuck it in my pocket. Job? Fell off? What are you talking about? I asked him brazenly. He then began to explain to me about being a Rosicrucian, what he did and why. I stood there staring at him with my mouth agape. He then told me about the girl he had worked on just a few days earlier, and that she had died during the ceremony. When he was in the process of doing the exorcism, her hair clip had fallen away and skittered next to him on the floor. He picked it up with the intention of giving it to her parents, and had forgotten. I pushed him towards the phone, hanging in the hallway. You have to call them. You have to call them right now, and tell them you have the clip. I will, just let me go change. I will call them right after supper. He gestured towards the stairs. No, you have to call them now, I said with exasperation. He called the home of her parents, and they told him they had been looking for it, and it was their favourite and they wanted to bury her with it. Directly after supper, Richard and I took the clip over to the girl's home. Richard handed it to her mother, who was so grateful to have found it she began to cry. I saw the little girl one more time when we arrived home. She was standing at the foot of the staircase. Only this time, she was smiling.
Well, we hope that you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you want to keep up to date with future episodes, then subscribe to our YouTube channel and like or follow our social media pages. You can also give the channel support by visiting our merchandise store and picking up some of our items. Please also take a moment to support our contributing artists who very kindly lend their talents to the show. Check out the links in the description on how you can do this. Well, that just leaves me to say, until next time my friends, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.